next two favorite services are last Sunday, when we have the Global Outreach Fair, and then this Sunday, when we share a bit more and also receive our pledge cards. What's your favorite part of last week?
My favorite part of the fair was I got all my stamps in my passport, and I even got approved refugee status.
Thank
I'm
God.
so glad it finally came through.
You get to stay in the country.
Yes.
We've been worried about that,
Yes.
Scott, for about 30 years. How old are you?
Yeah,
don't
30,
answer
yeah.
that. 30 years. Glad you finally got that. It's fun to be involved in what God's doing around the world. I want to show you a little slide of Julie and me. We were, about less than a year ago over in Mongolia. We never thought we'd get to go to Mongolia. I remember sitting in sixth grade drawing maps thinking, who in the world goes to Mongolia? And then we found ourselves there. And while we were there, one of the things we did was tape 24 30-minute TV shows that have been shown and are now airing on the #1 independent, non-governmental controlled television stations. It goes all throughout Mongolia. I got a little introduction to our program. Let's see if this works, please. Here's how our TV show starts.
Хончны зүрх сэтгэл. Үзэгч та зохиолч пастор Рожер Барьерийн 7 хоног бүр хүргэх Хончны зүрх сэтгэл нэвтрүүлгийг үзэх гэж байна. Таны Есүс Христтэй харилцах харилцаа ямар байдг вэ? Энэ харилцаагаа та хол, ойр, эсвэл халуун дотно гэж тодорхойлох уу? Сүнслэг өсөлтийн талаар олон жил судалж байгаа доктор Рожер Барьер энэ тусгай цуврал хичээлээр дамжуулан ертөнцийн эзнийг таних мөн чанар болон сүнсээр төлөвшсөн ертөнцийн эзний хүн болох тухай заах юм аа. Хэрв та энэ хичээлийн аль нэг хэсгийг үзэж чадалгүй өнгөрчихвөл өнөөдрийн хичээлийг болон Eagle телевизийн Библи судлалын бусад материалуудыг Eagle дундуур зураас TV-цэг MN вебсайтнаас татан авч сүнсээрээ өсөн дэвжигтэй ашиглах боломжтой. Доктор Рожер Барьер 35 дахь жилдээ Саудерн Баптист сумын пастораар ажиллаж байна. Тэрээр эхнэр Жулийнхаа хамт сүнслэг өсөлт, дотн байдлын талаар байнга семинар хийдэг. Хамгийн сүүлд тэд Улаанбаатар хотод Христийн сумын пасторууд болон ертөнцийн эзэнд үйлчилдэг бусад хүмүүст зориулан сургалт явуулсан юм. Одоо бүгдээрээ доктор Барьерийн заах сүнсний өсөлтийн зарчмууд нэртэй хичээлд анхаарлаа хандуулцгаая.
Now, you know, it's interesting because we talked on relationships from a biblical perspective. And on this television station, non-governmental run, Julie and I have the second highest most watched program on the entire Eagle network. Can you believe that? Isn't that fun? Well, we've enjoyed doing a little bit of global outreach for CASAS. Our main theme comes off of Matthew, doesn't it?
Yeah, Jesus said, therefore go and make disciples of all nations, teaching them to observe everything I've commanded you, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And he says, surely I'll be with you always to the very end of the age. You guys recently, you and Julie, were able to spend a lot of time in some Central Asian, Middle Eastern countries teaching, encouraging missionaries.
Yeah, we've enjoyed our opportunities there. Here's a picture of one street in one Central Asian country. It's exciting to see what God's doing. You can have this opportunity too. It's exciting to be in part of the kingdom. There are wonderful adventures over there. You really get to enjoy what it's like to live in another country. In this particular country, it was rather chilly, and we were freezing in our hotel room. No heat. We had no hot water. Have you ever tried to take a shower? You know how it's like when the shower hits you and you just freeze? Well, try turning that thing on and jumping in and jumping out. It's a wonderful experience. You just ought to try it. And after 4 days, we finally figured out how to turn it all on. It had plenty of heat and water. We just didn't know which button to turn. So when you're overseas, you just turn everything you can, and finally something's going to work. We're sitting in the restaurant. Julie says to me, Roger, there's bugs crawling out my leg, on my pants. And sure enough, out of her pants leg come these bugs. See, this is just an adventure. You need to experience things like this. So you've run out of bottled water in the morning. How many of you have ever brushed your teeth with Coke? Come on, it's okay. It fizzes great. You want to say to yourself, I'll always do something like this when I get home, see? Just adventures. We were in one nation, and like many of them, pictures don't do it justice. There was one country we were in where people just throw the trash out the window. And, you know, listen, when you go overseas, you take your pictures, and you come home and you say to yourself, it didn't look nearly this clean. See, there's no smells here on the picture. and you really don't see how dirty this really is. And we just showed you a picture of a dog picking through the garbage. We could have shown you some pictures of men and women picking through the garbage. It's hard over there. It's good for us to experience this and see it just a little bit. If you're not careful, you'll assimilate right in the culture. We're in our hotel room. Julie's made coffee. She walks over to the window, opens the windows, and she's getting ready to throw coffee grounds out on the street. I said, what are you doing? She says, well, everybody else is doing it. And I said, Julie, we're barriers. We don't throw our coffee grounds out the window. We don't do things like that. It's just getting used to some of the things that are going on over there behind the scenes. You'll be blessed by this. Came back on our last trip. We landed in Orlando to make connections to come here. I was in the men's room there in Atlanta, and out of one of the stalls comes this cursing. I mean, I hadn't heard a stream of cursing like this in, I guess maybe, well, not since I remember a guy on the golf course that cursed like this, but not very often. Blankety blank, blankety blank, oh, blankety blank, blankety blank. Went on for 30, 40 seconds, blankety blank. All the guys are out there standing, wonder what's going on in that stall. Oh, blankety. Then he yells this, I dropped my blankety blank cigarette in the toilet. And we thought, well, we're back in the United States again. Here we are. And I thought to myself, at least the guy had a toilet, you know. It's a different world over there. It's an exciting place to go and have adventures.
In the U.S., it's like we live in a bubble. We don't think about the rest of the world that often, but this is something that we want us to break out of that bubble, and it's something that we can all experience.
Julie and I finally realized, hadn't thought about it till this week, Julie and I are really global outreach workers from CASAS. When we were first going into the ministry, before we came here, we prayed, God, what's your will for our lives? We wanted to go into mission work. And even the first 10 years here, we kept filling out forms, wanted to go overseas, and finally God said to both of us, you're not going. Your job is to stay in the United States and raise a lot of money so other people can go. And now I realize that our dream's really being fulfilled because God's letting us go to all kinds of places besides all the folks that have been sent overseas. We've taught in Brazil. That was fun. Greece. Azerbaijan. Ministered to several hundred pastors in the Ukraine who came from all over the country for several weeks. Taught in Jordan, in Turkey, in Mongolia. And that's just an outreach of our global outreach ministries, which so many of you take part in. Now I say that to say this. We want you to go. We do. It's a thrill of a lifetime when you go over there. You'll discover several things. I've just summarized 5 quick ones. When you go overseas, you'll discover God is alive and well, and you can have a very significant part in advancing the kingdom. We're going to talk in a moment about what you might be able to do over there. There's all kinds of things you can do over there. Julie and I had been in this one particular country about a year after the Berlin Iron Curtain fell and communism fell. And immediately Christians started coming out of the woodwork because they were all over these communist countries, just suppressed. And in less than a year, the workers in this particular country had built their church. Isn't that a beautiful church? See, God's alive and well, and you and I can have a part in it. You'll be humbled, secondly. I see the man circled here. His name's Mark. I was going to tell you his story because you'll be humbled by the sacrifices of these people. But I decided, thinking about it, I can't tell his story, not in a public setting, I guess, because it's really gruesome what they did to him, what they did to his wife. But I do remember being in the Middle East here recently. We'd been back to a country for a second time, and this Iranian woman stopped Julie at the elevator and said to Julie, last year I slipped out of Iran and came here. I didn't know how I was going to survive another day. And she says to Julie, you talked on relationships. And I decided, we do need others to get through, and I've made it through another year. And she looked at Julie and she said, I came here this year thinking, I'm not sure I can make it another year. Said to Julie, well, but you've talked on spiritual growth, and I realize God can use these things to make me like Christ. I think I can make it another year. Now, she's not a missionary. She's just an Iranian Christian who's trying to live out her faith in a really difficult place. You'll be impressed at how humble. You'll be humble. Number 3, you'll develop relationships. Long-lasting. Here's a place in the Ukraine Julie and I were enjoying with a family. You get those relationships developed now through the internet. You can keep those going for as long as you live. A lot of folks are. You'll discover People are alike in every culture. This is a giant department store. There's not much in there, is there? Nothing to buy. They'd like to have a washer. They'd like to have a dryer. They'd like a stove or refrigerator or some clothes. Don't you? They're just like we are. Well, how do I act when I get over there? Just be yourself. They're just like we are. All right? Same needs, same wants. It's not hard. And finally, number 5, you'll have some serendipities, I promise you. What's a serendipity? When you least expect it, something special will happen. And you'll come back from your trip and you had some serendipities. Here's one for Julie. We're in Jordan. And they took us down to the place where Christ was baptized. That's the Jordan River right in front of Julie. And 15 feet away is the Holy Land. She wanted to go to the Holy Land. So I said to her, hey, just jump in the water, swim over there, touch it, get back, and you can tell folks you've been in the Holy Land. And she looked up on the guard towers with the machine guns up there and decided she wasn't going to do that. And our pastor friend looks over, and Julie's got these big tears streaming down her cheeks. He says, sir, would you like to get over there? We can arrange it. Well, he told us how to go into the country and get rid of or use our passports and how we could rip the page out later and come back in. He taught us how to do that. And it was legal, but he showed us how to do this. And Julie got to spend 18 hours in the Holy Land. She's always wanted to be there. It's a serendipity. And you're going to really, really enjoy this.
Last week we introduced you to 7 full-time Cassis Global workers, and today we're going to introduce you to another, Cherie Gray, who reaches out to the whole world from right here in Tucson. And your global outreach gift supports Cherie as she welcomes and helps refugee families assimilate into American life. How you doing, Cherie? This week, for example, you're kind of like a matchmaker. You connect these churches and Bible fellowships with these refugee families. This week, you actually welcomed a new family to Tucson.
Yes, and for me, the most exciting part is when I get to introduce a group like this group from Casas that have never met a refugee family and bring them together. So last week, I spoke to their group, and this week, they welcomed a new family.
And what did they do, like, to get ready before the refugees came?
Oh, that they got to help the refugee agency furnish the apartment. So they brought furnishings, they put pictures on the wall, they stocked the kitchen, and got everything, made it look like a beautiful home ready for the family.
That's great. So they opened the fridge and there's a gallon of milk there. And did they ever get to actually meet the refugees?
Oh, that was the best part. We all went out last Thursday to the airport, and we had our signs and our flags, and we welcomed them. And this is a young couple from Iraq. So this was their first time in America. We were there.
Wow. So last week, our Cassis people in this room think refugees are scary people from far away who kill Americans. And then this week, they meet them face to face and fall in love with them and find out they're real people like us.
Right, and when we were right there at the airport, we were listening as the woman from Iraq, the wife, she was sharing with us about what her life was like when she was living in Iraq. And she and her husband were both helping the American military with the war against Iraq, and that's why their life was in danger. So she was telling us her story, and she was in tears as she was talking, of course, because she's left relatives behind, and their lives are in danger as well.
And some of the things you do are like parties. This week, you helped 2 Bible fellowships throw a baby shower for another family from Iraq.
Yes, and that family already has twins, but this is their first baby that they're having in America. So it's their American baby, and for them, that's very exciting. We had 2 ABFs come together and throw a baby shower for them. They collected all kinds of things to bless this family. They gave them a new crib and stroller and car seat and lots of other things, as well as a mound of diapers that they pulled together that we're going to use to bless other refugee families as well.
So you don't have to, is it my turn? You had something important. Go ahead.
So these 2 groups of people from different worlds come together, and how do they interact together, the Cassis people and these people from Iraq?
Oh, at the baby shower, at first it was a little bit stiff, and nobody knew each other, and they weren't sure what to do. But then we played a baby shower game, and of course that loosened it up.
Have you played baby shower games?
I
But
love
you gotta
them,
have
Scott.
games. So this particular one was kind of like charades, and you sort of had to be crazy to do it. And of course, we ended up all laughing together and had a good time. And I think it was that evening that the Americans that were there realized that, yes, these women have head coverings, but they're just normal people.
My turn? So really, you might say something like this. We can go to the world overseas, but the world's coming here to us, isn't it? And you felt your calling right here.
Exactly.
Adult Bible Fellowships from Costas. I know you coordinate lots of different churches in this as well as ours. You grew up here. You know a lot of folks here. So one of our Adult Bible Fellowships says, you know, we really would like to get involved here. Could you help them?
I would love to come and talk to your group about how you can get involved. I could tell you about how refugees come here and why. And there's 3 ways that your group could help refugees. And one is to help furnish their apartment. Another way is to throw a baby shower. And another way is to adopt a refugee family for 6 months. And that is not, it doesn't mean that you pay their rent or buy them new clothes. It just means that you spend time with them and do what you already do best with your friends. You love on them and serve them.
Cherie, thank you so much for all that you do, and thank you for representing us.
Thank you,
Bless you.
Cherie. Amen. Thank you. Now, many of you were here last week. We had a number of our overseas workers. So stand up, please. Do something special. Go ahead, stand up. It's okay. And remember last week? Oh, come on. It's okay. Stand up. It's all right. Stand up. No, stand up. This is not hard. I made that not clear. Okay, sit down. All of you stand up, all right? No wonder all of you stand up. Now, here's what we're going to do. Because if you were here last week, see, we welcomed some of our missionaries here, and we talked about why with some cheers and some shouts. And I want you to practice, because we're going to introduce a man in a moment that I want you to cheer and shout for, all right? So I'm gonna put my hand down. When I do, you go, yay, hooray, glory, hallelujah, you know? Woohoo, woohoo, woohoo. Try that one, okay, ready? Here we go. Glory to God, shout and yell. Woohoo, woohoo. Okay. Okay, very good. Now, just stay standing for a moment, because this won't take but just a second. In a minute, we're going to introduce ourselves to George Vanderveer. Don't come out just yet. We're going to cheer for George. A word about George. George's been at Costas over 30 years. And if many of you know George, we put his face on the screen. You know George. He loves global outreach. See, if you get here at 4, 5:30, or 6 on Sunday morning, you'll find George walk on the perimeter of our church site, just praying for what God's going to do in here, praying for the Holy Spirit to bless this place. He's been a tremendous impact in our church. A word or two more about him.
Here's some quotes from George. Giving to global outreach is just second nature. If I stop working, I won't be able to give. I have nothing else to do with my money. I have no intention of leaving it at the gravesite. George has gone on 9 overseas trips, including 6 trips to Turkey, including last year in June when he was 80 years old. This year he was getting ready to go, and then his doctor stopped him.
So let's just welcome George, shall we? Come on, George. Hey, George! Well done. George, you're the best. You are just the best. That's so special. Man. Amen. Well, thank you. And George, you can be seated. George, you're just one of the most remarkable men I know in your spiritual heart for God and godly things. You know, only heaven will tell the impact you've had in your prayers for global outreach. And who knows all the things that God's done here because of your prayers here. So we'd like to give you just a little memento maybe that represents what we think of when we think of you. We selected a picture, had lots to choose from. We selected a picture of a man who looks a lot like you in prayer. Doesn't that guy look a lot like George? All right. Just as a reminder of all the years you've prayed here, of all the trips you've made, of all the bread of life you've shared with other folks. We really do. Thank God for you, George. Admire you. One of the best men we all know. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You want to help him down? Oh, thank you. Thanks, George. Thank you. All right. Wow. That's special. Our friend Tom Terry. Tom, come on up. Tom now is the leader of Eagle Television in Mongolia. Tom became a Christian here when he was, what were you, in your early 20s, late teens? What was it? 19 or 20. Tom became a Christian. During an evangelistic service, he came down to the front and gave his life to Christ. He's been a Christian about 3 minutes. When the evangelist looked over at Tom, saw him at the front, and assuming he was a very spiritual man, hands Tom the microphone and says, will you say the closing prayer? Tom had never prayed a prayer in his life. And I got to be really honest. It was the worst prayer I ever heard of all time. But it was your first prayer, and it got you started. Now listen, if you'd known Tom, you never would have guessed that today he'd be the head of Eagle Television over in Mongolia, the only non-governmental controlled free independent television station in Mongolia, which does some really special things. They've got a deal with the government, with their supporters, 13 hours of just straight news, and 4 to 5 hours a day just devoted to Christian programming, which goes throughout the whole country. You've really had a special ministry there. We really thank God for what he's done for you. Thank you.
Eagle TV really is unique in Mongolia. It's the only Christian television station on the entire Asian continent, from the border of Eastern Europe to the Sea of Japan. We're sort of like a Fox News of Mongolia. 13 hours a day of news, 4 hours a day of strategically placed Christian programs that are doing evangelism and discipleship. But really, our relationship with the Mongolian people was really cemented through what we did with our coverage of the Iraq War over 5 years ago. You see, the other stations did just a little bit of coverage, and it was heavily censored by many of the communist authorities. But what we did is we did completely uncensored coverage. In fact, we opened up the phone lines and we asked people to call and give their opinion, pro or con, about the war. Well, in just a few days, we took more than 4,000 phone calls from Mongolians who were, for the first time, voicing their opinion openly. That had never happened in Mongolia before. The government was just incensed. But the end result of that was that Eagle TV became known as a station that cares about the average person's opinion.
You know, one of the interesting things about that is the trust. You know, Julie and I saw that when we were there. But you go into a lot of communities, and you've got to go through all this red tape, all this governmental tape, just to come into a city to say anything or even enter into the border with your ministry. And because of the trust, when you send folks out on the countryside, it's a little different for you when you just walk right in and say what?
You know, a lot of ministries will go out into the countryside and try to share the gospel to get licensing and permission. And they got to negotiate for days, sometimes weeks, just to be able to do the ministry they're going to do. But our guys, they go out to the countryside, they go to the city governor, and they say, we're here from Eagle TV to show Bible movies. And the city governor usually says, would you like to use our theater? Can you show the movies to my staff? We'll take the day off and watch movies and do Bible studies with you. That happens almost every time.
Yeah. Now, one of Tom's heartfelt desires is to get Christianity and the foundation out into Mongolia, and through television, this is dramatically possible. One of his tools is to take Bible movies, Old Testament, he's leading Old Testament all the way to Jesus. The Old Testament gives the foundation leading up to Jesus, and show these movies and have call-ins and do Bible studies with them. They span the whole nation. What's really interesting is where did he get all these movies? Remember a few years ago? Ted Turner made them all. Ted Turner's movies are all over Mongolia. They edit them a little bit, but they're Bible stories of Genesis and Exodus. And Tom was telling me when they show the movie about the creation. See, Buddhism is a cyclical thing. It always, where did it start? They don't know. Where does it end? They don't know. This is real simplistic, but it's a cyclical thing. No start, no end. And when they see the movie about the creation, Tom says over and over what they'll say something like this. Oh, now we know how the world started. Now we can put life into perspective and find meaning. It's amazing the dramatic impact these movies in their culture. When you showed these, you were rather surprised. that the most watched, most intriguing movie was the biblical movie about Laban and Jacob.
Well, that's right. A lot of Mongolians are idol worshippers, literally idol worshippers. Mongolian culture is based partly on Buddhism and these superstitious folk religions like animism, which often involves idol worship. So when you show a movie about the biblical patriarch Jacob and his nemesis Laban, you know, Laban was an idol worshiper. And in the story of Jacob and Laban is worshiping these idols and doing what he's doing. He's in a process of losing everything that is of heart value to him, including the idol that he worshiped. But as Jacob seeks God more and more, God blesses him. Well, when a Buddhist and animist sees that, they begin to question what they believe, and they begin to think, maybe Christ is better than idols. In fact, just a few months ago, we were out in a community, and there was an elderly gentleman there, and he had his idols passed down to him and his family generation after generation. And he saw these Bible movies, and he began to realize, maybe Christ really is better than an idol.
Little video, guy in the upper right, short little video on iPhone. Here's what he said about his idols. Here's what he did.
Үзээд одоо тэр бурхан шигтэй ингэж одоо баг хэрэггүй юм байна. Тэгээ бүр хараад одоо хайсан. Маш их ойлгомжтой тийм хянаа байсан. Тэгэхэд бол тэр уучлж ийсэн энэ тэр нь бол маш их гоё санаг.
Isn't that amazing? You know, that's just amazing. 15 years ago, Mongolia was known as the most Buddhist nation on the face of the earth. There's a tremendous movement of dissatisfaction as the communists fled away. Well, still there, but the restrictive government is not there. So there's a flowing up, a groundswelling, and now, 15 years ago, not one Christian church in Mongolia. 15 years ago, not one recognizable Christian in Mongolia. And today, Christian churches outnumber Buddhist temples 8 to 1. Isn't that amazing? And a lot of these folks are finding great hope. They see the movies, they watch the television, they hear from the step-by-step ministry teams, but most of them don't have a Bible. And a Bible can become something I'd give my life for almost. Isn't that true?
Oh, yeah. Folks will go to any debt sometimes to get a Bible. Out in the Mongolian countryside, where our step-by-step teams do so much ministry, there's no open Bible distribution. There's no corner Barnes & Noble you're going to run down to pick up a new copy of the Bible. In fact, the only way you're going to get it if it's brought to you like our teams do. And in fact, one of our step-by-step teams, about 3 months ago, they were out in the community, and this elderly woman came up to them, and she told them the story about how she always wanted to have her own copy of the Bible. And she was out walking one day and had to go to the public outhouse to go relieve herself. Now, you know, outhouses in Mongolia, this is not like your average porta potty down at the construction site, okay? It's a barely standing wood shack, and inside you've got this deep open pit with just 2 loosely laid planks of wood there that you have to balance yourself on to do what you got to do. It's dirty, it's nasty, it's not a fun experience. She goes in there, shuts the door, latches it, turns around, looks down into the hole, and what do you think she sees? Somebody threw a Bible down there. Now, you know where I'm going with this story, okay? She goes down into that hole, she retrieves that Bible, takes it home, cleans it off, and that is her most treasured Bible today.
You know, there's a hunger for the Word. I've got, I don't know how many scores of Bibles I've had over my life. And like you kind of forget how precious this thing is. But all of a sudden, you never had one. Your heart's being yearned by the Spirit as you see the truth of the movies, for example. And you'd go anywhere to get one. We're seeing that happen. So Tom's got 2 teams for step-by-step who go out into the countryside, have vehicles they use. One of the vehicles was just in an accident. The folks all survived, thank God. But during the last year, these ministry teams ministered in 84 different communities, started 10 new churches, showed the various TV Bible movies to over 31,000 people. And you've got 3 teams ready to go. You need another vehicle or so. We'd like to help with that. Tell us about that a bit.
Well, our teams, when they go out into the countryside, you know, they're not traveling down I-10 or something. There are no roads. They are traveling hundreds and hundreds of miles in some really rugged terrain. And so the standard kind of vehicles we have just won't last. So what we really need to do is provide them with a Land Rover that can handle this really rugged terrain.
You know, when we were there, we realized going from city to city, oftentimes they'd pull out their compass. Just no roads to a lot of these places. So we've got a check for $18,000 for a Land Rover for you to buy and use for one of your teams. We're going to put a GPS in it so they won't have to use their compass. Would that be okay?
That works good.
So Tom, for $18,000, out of our global outreach funds, we set aside some specific monies. We set this aside earlier, and you know, I'm looking forward to a really special relationship for many years to come, doing different projects for you along the way. Looking forward to that. Really glad to take part in this ministry. So Tom, may God bless you and your work and many others with this new vehicle.
Well, thank you very much. And I want to thank all of you for your help. This is going to enable us to reach people in the countryside that can't be reached any other way. So thank you. And
You're welcome.
I want to say I'm looking forward to you coming to Mongolia again so that your show can be number one.
All right, Tom. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to a couple of countries coming up soon, and Tom says, well, if you'll just fly from, well, you can't believe where he's asking us to fly from, bound over to Mongolia. We're going to do a whole other set of programs. That'll be a lot of fun.
Tom
Scott.
is one of our long-term global workers, and I want to introduce you to another short-term global worker from Cassis, Ari Sloan, and 5 of his friends from his Bible fellowship recently returned from a trip to Central Asia. How you doing, Ari? Good, thank you.
I think it's okay. Thank you. Oh, I thought I learned how to do this. Testing. Is it working? No, it's not working. Catch. No, don't do that. Thank you.
Check.
Oh, boy. Thank you. Let's give Steve a good hand for that. Crystal, thank you. All right, Ari, we're ready.
So, Ari, how
all right,
did
it's
you
working.
decide to go on this trip?
Well, I was in my ABF Sunday class this one day, and some pamphlets were passed out for an upcoming trip to Central Asia, and I just heard God tell me, you are going on this trip. I turned over, looked at my wife, and I said, honey, I'm going on this trip. And sure enough, I did.
Now, Ari is a tough Tucson cop, and
Yeah, I
you've
don't know about
seen
that.
most everything there is to see, but you were actually afraid to go on this trip.
Yes, I had a lot of fear going on the trip. Obviously, in the type of work that I do, you're in a lot of control, can't really show a lot of fear. And I just knew that, you know, going 8,000 miles away wasn't going to have any control. And just that fear of the unknown just kind of crept into my heart.
Now, I would guess that you feel pretty comfortable having your gun as a police officer. I mean, it's just nice to have around.
Yeah, I suppose
You're
so.
used to being with it at all. Yeah. I'd ask if you have it up here this morning, but I won't do that. But I know that you feel comfortable with it. Could it be that one of the reasons you felt kind of uncomfortable was you're going to be over there, no gun, totally out of control, totally new situation?
Definitely a combination of everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't it interesting that we're kind of afraid to go over there? He's going to tell them you're going to have a great time. But if you go over there, a lot of the folks will say, is it safe to come to America? See, they watch our television. They see our news. They see the folks, you know, in Detroit and the schools that are, and they want to know, is it safe to come over here? Isn't that an interesting turnaround? But I think it's fair to say it's pretty safe. Now, Scott, talk to us about when he got at peace.
And how long did that fear hang on to you?
I had the fear up until pretty much the exact moment that I stepped off the plane in the country, set my foot there. I was immediately at peace, and from that point on, I just felt that I had, you know, just a blanket of God's presence around me, and it was just surrounding our whole team, actually.
And what'd you do when you were there?
When we were there, I had the opportunity to give 2 seminars about crime in America to these college students, about my job, and had the opportunity to just, you know, speak English with these students. And as a matter of fact, 3 of the students that I just really opened up my heart to, and I'll call them my brothers because that's how we call each other. They skipped their classes for one whole day just to be with me, and we just spent the whole day together, talked about Christianity, Islam, all the deep issues in life.
And one of them said something to you, Ari, about what kind of person you are.
Yeah, one of the students actually said to me, we need more men like you here in our country. And I was kind of taken back, and I said, you have whatever you see in me, you have in you also. So you just have to let it out and just be strong.
And now you keep in contact with these guys still, right?
Yes, at least once a week. I'm talking to one or two of them via email. They expressed the want to be a part of my life and to share my happiness, share my sorrow, and I in return, want to do that also.
It was tough for you to leave, wasn't it?
It was very, very tough to leave. I absolutely left part of my heart there in the country. It changed my life forever. It's something that I'll never, ever forget.
And you were saying that this trip sort of it reminded you of when you were a kid.
Yeah, growing up here in town, I remember when I was a little kid, and I wouldn't have school for whatever holiday or whatever. I would go to work with my dad, and that really was just an awesome day. I got to work with him. He gave me stuff to do, and that's what this trip reminded me of, was going to work for, in this case, my Heavenly Father.
Sorry. You go ahead.
So I just kind of see that now in my everyday life, going on this trip and the experiences that I've had, and just working with my Heavenly Father every day now has just emboldened me to talk about my faith and talk about Christianity.
You're kind of excited about this, aren't you?
Yes.
You'd kind of want to say to everybody here, you really ought to go, wouldn't you?
I would absolutely recommend it to everybody. It will change your life, give you a whole new perspective and a whole new strength.
And this trip's been sort of part of your discipleship. This has helped you grow spiritually.
Absolutely.
And wouldn't you kind of say to folks, I wasn't sure what all I could do over there, but did God surprise me? I got used every day. Isn't that a pretty fair statement?
Absolutely. Every day. He uses you, and you don't even know sometimes.
Let's say you and your wife, Dawn, and your daughter go overseas on the next trip. Will you be coming home, or are you going to stay over there?
I would venture guess we'd probably end up staying there.
You had a great time.
Absolutely.
And look, guys, if you decide to go on a trip, you don't have to shave for 2 weeks. Is that nice?
That was pretty nice, although my daughter didn't appreciate that. She's only 4, so when I came back, she said, she kind of was very upset about that and said, next time that you go, Daddy, you're going to have to shave.
Yeah, that's good from your daughter. Now, you're sitting in the class, of course, and they're passing out these brochures. The director, the leader of your class is Steve Hagedorn, and you had a very special name for him, didn't you?
Yeah, I called him Mr. Skeptical. He was very skeptical about everything, skeptical about going to the trip. I was Mr. Afraid, and he was Mr. Skeptical. He went so far as to say, I don't know what we're going to actually do in this short amount of time. By the time we get there and get used to the time zone and get situated, we're not going to have time to do anything. And besides, we're not missionaries. What could we possibly do? And before we got into country, he said, if I'm right, and I think that I'm going to be right, I'm going to come back and I'm going to talk to Scott, and he's going to hear all about this.
Now, when it was time to go, that's what he thought ahead of time. But when it was time to leave the country, you and he had another kind of discussion.
Yes, his perspective changed. He actually said to me, we need to think of a way how we can stay here and not even go back.
Wow. And Steve told me at the end of his time, he said, it was so worth it, I discovered. Number one, it was so obvious that the long-term workers there need people from the U.S. to go help them. Number two, I had no idea we'd be able to communicate with so many people so easily about the deepest issues of life. And three, my heart was changed to love people who don't have a relationship with God.
Ari, thank you.
Thank
Always
you,
a
guys.
pleasure. God
Thanks.
bless you. Thank you so much for sharing. Brian Wilson grew up at Casas. He was in our student ministry not long ago. How many of you remember Brian? A lot of you taught him. Good. A lot of you shared with him in the student ministry. He was kind of lost, remember, as a teenager? Like most teenagers, kind of confused what comes next. He went on a short team trip, short-term trip, and God got him some really special focus, didn't he, Scott?
Yep, and he became one of our full-time global workers in Africa. And on November 27th, Brian Wilson landed a plane carrying the first full-time workers into this area of Zambia that's so remote that as far as anyone knows, there's been no missionaries, no churches, and not one believer. And when Brian's plane landed, 500 smiling, leaping children surrounded the plane so tightly that he couldn't get the doors open. And missionaries now are living there, sharing the story of Jesus, and the people tell the missionary, "We've never heard this message before. No one has ever come to tell us." Brian and his plane fill a critical role in his country. The team that they serve is starting 400 churches a year with 18 people groups that have never heard of Christ.
And he needs a garage for his airplane. Real simple. It lives outdoors. Any little neighborhood kid can come along and pull wheel pants off and unscrew the screws and grab a bit of this, that, and the other. Whenever he wants to refuel the thing, he's got to roll 55-gallon drums through the mud. Hope it's not raining when he tries to put gas in the top spouts up there. It's time to repair it. He puts the parts down in the mud, works outdoors in the mud. Remember Brian? He's raised $75,000 of the $100,000 he needs for a new hangar. And so we decided that we'd like to get him the rest of that money to build his hangar. So we've got a check for Brian. He'll be here next year. Couldn't be here this year. We've got a check for Brian to finish out his hangar. But look, Scott, it's blank.
Yeah, the date's not filled in, the dollar's not filled in. It seems that we have reached the end of our project funds for this past year. You saw us give a check earlier today. We gave a check last week to Roberto Morales for $50,000 to train pastors and have how-to conferences for 150 pastors over the next 2 years in Mexico and Peru. And we presented another check from your global outreach offerings to Doug and Dina to finish building a student ministry center in Central Asia for $175,000.
Those were special times last week. We don't have this money yet, but through the global outreach offerings, you and I give this next year. It'll be just one of the numerous projects we'll be doing overseas. And so I want you to take out your pledge card, if you will. It's in your handout. I can't encourage you enough to be a part of this work and this ministry. If you're not ready to put it in the plate, we use this for planning. If you're not ready to put it in the plate, that's okay. You can take the envelope, mail it to us, or even bring it next week. It's great fun. It's a great fun. He's going to be so pleased to get this $25,000 as soon as we raise this. But notice, Scott, you can't sign it.
No, I don't think he'd be able to cash it if I signed it.
No, it'd be worthless if you signed it.
That's right.
But we all could sign it, see? And so as you and I give to Global Outreach this next year, this is one of the first projects we'll fund, along with several others. Thanks, Scott. Amen. Thank you. Okay. I want to do two things. I just want to show you a short little clip, and then we'll bring our Global Outreach offerings. Short little clip from a couple in a Central Asian country. He is a electrical engineer. His wife has his doctorate in education. And they both gave that up to be national directors for Christianity of one particular group inside of his country. And they're making this appeal to come. So just a short little appeal. Let's watch this together.